Recorded Books presents an unabridged recording of All the Pretty Horses by Cormac McCarthy, narrated by Frank Muller. This book is copyrighted 1992 by Cormac McCarthy. This recording is copyrighted 1992 by Recorded Books. The year is 1949. What should be a time of beginning has become a time of ending, of dying. At 16, John Grady Cole is in search of a new life, a new land, a new dream. And now, All the Pretty Horses.
Part 1. The candle flame and the image of the candle flame caught in the pier glass, twisted and righted when he entered the hall and again when he shut the door. He took off his hat and came slowly forward. The floorboards creaked under his boots. In his black suit he stood in the dark glass where the lilies leaned so palely from their wasted cut-glass vase. Along the cold hallway behind him hung the portraits of forebears only dimly known to him, all framed in glass and dimly lit above the narrow wainscoting. He looked down at the guttered candle stub. He pressed his thumbprint in the warm wax pooled on the oak veneer. Lastly, he looked at the face, so caved and drawn among the folds of funeral cloth, the yellowed mustache, the eyelids paper-thin. That was not sleeping. That was not sleeping. It was dark outside and cold and no wind. In the distance a calf bawled. He stood with his hat in his hand. "You never combed your hair that way in your life," he said. Inside the house there was no sound save the ticking of the mantel clock in the front room. He went out and shut the door. Dark and cold and no wind and a thin gray reef beginning along the eastern rim of the world. He walked out on the prairie and stood holding his hat like some supplicant to the darkness over them all, and he stood there for a long time. As he turned to go, he heard the train. He stopped and waited for it. He could feel it under his feet. It came boring out of the east like some ribald satellite of the coming sun, howling and bellowing in the distance, and the long light of the headlamp running through the tangled mesquite brakes and creating out of the night the endless fence line down the dead straight right-of-way and sucking it back again, wire and post, mile on mile into the darkness after where the boiler smoke disbanded slowly along the faint new horizon, and the sound came lagging, and he stood still holding his hat in his hands in the passing ground shutter, watching it till it was gone. Then he turned and went back to the house. She looked up from the stove when he came in and looked him up and down in his suit. "Buenos dias, guapo," she said. He hung the hat on a peg by the door among slickers and blanket coats and odd pieces of tack, and came to the stove and got his coffee and took it to the table. She opened the oven and drew out a pan of sweet rolls she'd made and put one on a plate and brought it over and set it in front of him together with a knife for the butter, and she touched the back of his head with her hand before she returned to the stove. "I appreciate you lighting the candle," he said. "Como?" "La candela, la vela." "No fui yo," she said. "La señora?" "Claro." "No se levantó antes que yo." He drank the coffee. It was just grainy light outside, and Arturo was coming up toward the house. He saw his father at the funeral, standing by himself across the little gravel path near the fence. Once he went out to the street to his car, then he came back. A norther had blown in about mid-morning, and there were spits of snow in the air with blowing dust, and the women sat holding onto their hats. They'd put an awning up over the gravesite, but the weather was all sideways, and it did no good. The canvas rattled and flapped, and the preacher's words were lost in the wind. When it was over and the mourners rose to go, the canvas chairs they'd been sitting on raced away, tumbling among the tombstones. In the evening he saddled his horse and rode out west from the house. The wind was much abated, and it was very cold, and the sun sat blood-red and elliptic under the reefs of blood-red cloud before him. He rode where he would always choose to ride, out where the western fork of the old Comanche road, coming down out of the Kiowa country to the north, passed through the westernmost section of the ranch, and you could see the faint trace of it bearing south over the low prairie that lay between the north and middle forks of the Conch.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.